then we do have some more callers. So I want to get to the next call here. This is Daniel calling in from Vancouver. Daniel, what's going on tonight?
Hi. Hi, how are you, Dan? How are you, Empathetic Atheist?
Yes.
I am good. How are you?
Hello? Okay, I'm fine, thank you. I was just wondering, the other day I came across Amber Scora, and she used to be a Jehovah's Witness turned atheist. She tried to, when she was still with Jehovah's Witness, she tried to convert people in her native place in Canada, and she had no success. So she decided to go to China and convert the hapless Chinese there. Okay, but during her stay, she realized that there's no foundation to her belief because she had more time to think for herself. And then she became atheist. So now my question is, does she ever feel, or do theists turned atheists like you, Dan, yourself, who spend some time trying to convert people, do they ever feel guilt for having converted these people? Do they ever try to reach out to them and try to reverse what happened?
Well, here's the thing. I can't speak for Amber, but I can definitely say for myself, I definitely felt that. You got to understand, at one point, I used to work at a summer camp for kids. I used to preach every week to those kids. And I tell stories to them that were in an effort to try to convince them that these beliefs were true and that you should trust the faith. I talked to hundreds of kids, well over 1,000, probably maybe 2,000, 3,000 across, those multiple summers. So, I can't reach out to all those kids and just say, hey, don't listen to me anymore.
I know.
I don't have that information, and I wouldn't want to do that anyway, because that would be a little strange. But right. There have been some people that I have who know me and since have heard about my story. What's really awkward for my case is a lot of people, I don't know who's watched my video and who hasn't. Some people have watched my video and I didn't realize that they knew that was out there. And then they want to talk to me about it. And so I'll talk to them about it. I'll be honest with them, but it's also not my job to tell people what they should think in that sense either. Like, just because I came to this conclusion myself doesn't mean that now it's my vision to do the opposite of what I was doing before and evangelize atheism necessarily. Like, obviously I do this fucking show and I fucking talk to people about this stuff all the time. But there's a difference between doing a call-in show and talking to people or talking to interested parties and just sending unsolicited messages to people and saying, by the way, God's not real. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of different. So yeah, I do feel guilt about it, but I also know that I sincerely held my beliefs for at least a good chunk of it. I think I was really doubting towards the end there, but like, I can't change who I was then. And I was acting under the presupposition that these beliefs were true. And so I was only doing what I thought was correct at the time. And so that's why I don't hold a lot of resentment towards folks who do this evangelism stuff in the first place. Yeah, I think it's wrong. I think they shouldn't do it, but like, I understand why. I get it. They think this is true. And if they want to get their friends into heaven, if they want them to have good lives and trust in Jesus, then they got to talk to them about it, because that's the method laid out for them. So all that to say, yeah, I do feel it, but if I can forgive other people for it, I can forgive myself for it and vice versa. So all I can do is move on and do what I can. I mean, I've probably given a bit back, at least now, more so than most people. I mean, doing this show and stuff, right? I mean, some people, they deconvert and they just move on with their lives. They don't talk about religion anymore. At least I'm still talking about it. So I don't know.
It's when it comes down to indoctrination. I see people can be deceived or the deceiver. Now, I typically always equate people to the deceived in my personal view, just because if I grew up going on about what my parents had taught me growing up, who says that they didn't have the same thing done to them? So I don't exactly blame somebody for believing what they grew up to believe. It's when I'm talking to somebody that gets in, I didn't get in contact with somebody that used critical thinking and reasoning until later in my life, after I had already reached the age of reason and learned how to make these decisions and how to think critically about things. The deceiver comes in when somebody is shown and demonstrated that whatever view they're holding is irrational, and they have gotten to the point to where they know that they have been duped, but just because they've spent their entire life's work on believing in this stuff and preaching about whatever their belief is, they have to stick with it. There's been countless times to where there's been claims to where we know that we may be wrong, but we don't want the younger kids to know that this is the case, especially when it comes to evolution and things like that.
Yeah, it's a sunk cost fallacy. I figured this stuff out as a young man, as a young adult. I cannot imagine what my experiences would be like if I figured this out when I was 30 or 40, already living my life. I mean, I'm lucky in that sense that I got out relatively early. There's some people that don't figure this out until way later, and props to them for being honest with themselves, because I think you're right. It's more beliefs for most people. For us, it's more of like an if-then statement kind of thing. But it's an identity for most people. It's life experiences, it's emotions, it's complicated, and that's why I try to give respect as much as I can, because people's religious beliefs are part of kind of the human tapestry. It's kind of part of what it means to be human, is to kind of wonder about these questions and act upon these philosophies, and that's deeply held in people. So you gotta give people enough space to have them figure stuff out themselves, but also kind of encourage them to think about things. It's kind of a hard line to draw sometimes on when it's good to talk to people about this stuff and when not. But I'm glad I figured it out. I've certainly talked to other people, and I'll say this much too. There are people that I've personally known who have found my story and then found other people's stories and also don't believe anymore. So I can at least say I've done a little bit in part for that. But I'm never going to be able to convince everybody. That's just not possible. So I do what I can. But that's a really great question, Daniel. And you're making me reflect a bit again on the things that I used to do and the things that I did. But I'm a different person now, and I'm doing my best every day. And at least I can't do that kind of harm anymore, because I don't know what kind of harm I did by encouraging those kinds of beliefs. And that's something that is just there. But what can you do? So.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. So I know that you're doing your part, and with your show, I bet that you have converted. You have made amends already.
Yes, I've resolved myself with my past sins. Right? Yeah. I hope so. I can only, like I said, just do what I keep doing what I'm doing, because I can't change the past. That's already there. And at least I wasn't like taking money from people at a church. You know what I mean? Like, at least I wasn't like telling people not to go to their doctor and just pray out their cancer or something like that. Like I wasn't that kind of Christian. But
you don't have a private jet?
Yeah, right. So there you go. And there are people who use these beliefs to abuse people and stuff, but people who do act sincerely on these beliefs, I can't blame them, because that was me. I'd be a hypocrite to say otherwise. So, but anyway, Daniel, thanks again for calling in about that. I appreciate the question, and looking forward to seeing what other questions you might have in the future. What do you think about that, Justin? I mean, like, people kind of figuring out how to move on from their past lives as a Christian versus an atheist. Because that's pretty common. That's something, that's an individual journey people kind of have to figure out.
It is, and for me, it took I would say my complete deconversion took about 5 years. Going from Catholicism to Christianity to I don't know. I think there's a higher being, some type of deism, and it basically trickled down from a hardcore fundamentalist belief all the way down to why am I kidding? What am I kidding myself right now? I want to convince myself that there's something out there just because that's what my entire life has been. But I finally got to the point to where I couldn't deal with that anymore. What held along and what carried along with that after I had become an atheist and was no longer convinced that I would still have fears about hell. I would still go back to Pascal's wager every now and then and think, what are the odds?
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because I felt the same way. It's like I wanted this to be true, like super, super bad, but I also wanted to be able to justify it. And if I couldn't justify it, I couldn't believe it was true. I just simply couldn't, because how could I possibly convince other people that this is true if I couldn't convince myself that this was true?
Absolutely.
So we